one so you'll stop playing games.
Now, I would let him go unless you want to make medical history. Good shit.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. What if I told you that one of the coolest men to ever hit television, a leather-jacketed icon with a simple thumbs up, was actually living under a rule so strict it defined his entire legacy? This isn't just the story of a sitcom. This is the story of Happy Days, the show that turned a side character into a cultural revolution. It's the story of how Henry Winkler, an unlikely actor with theater roots, transformed into Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, the ultimate symbol of cool. And it's the story of how one actor's discipline ensured that even decades later, the Fonz still stands untouchable in TV history. So stick around, because once you hear the rule that shaped everything, you'll never look at Happy Days the same way again. And I want to know what you think. Did that rule make Fonzie legendary or hold him back from becoming even bigger? The early 1970s were drenched in nostalgia for the 1950s. On Broadway, Grease was packing theaters with leather jackets and sock hops. At the movies, George Lucas's American Graffiti pulled audiences back into neon nights, drive-ins, and cars cruising under the glow of jukeboxes. America wanted to relive what it remembered as simpler times. Enter Gary Marshall, a writer and producer with a talent for family-friendly comedy. Marshall pitched the idea of a sitcom set in the Midwest during the post-war years, centering on the wholesome Cunningham family. In 1972, the concept debuted as a segment on Love American Style, with a pilot starring Ron Howard as Richie Cunningham and Anson Williams as his best friend Patsy Weber. At first, networks weren't convinced. But by January 1974, Happy Days premiered officially, and the timing couldn't have been better. Audiences connected instantly with its picture of small-town America, with Howard Cunningham and Marion Cunningham as the loving parents, Richie as the earnest teenager, and his friends Ralph Malph and Patsy providing comic relief. It was a warm family comedy, but little did anyone know. The real lightning bolt of the series wasn't Richie or his friends. It was a leather-clad biker who walked into Arnold's drive-in with a smirk, a snap of his fingers, and a natural coolness no one could ignore. That was Arthur Fonzarelli, or as the world would come to know him, Fonzie. Casting Fonzie was no easy task. In fact, producers originally pictured someone completely different for the role. They imagined a tall, blonde, brooding James Dean type, a textbook greaser with chiseled looks and a mysterious edge. On paper, that was the vision. But when Henry Winkler walked into the audition room, he was none of those things. He was shorter, dark-haired, and trained in classical stage acting, even with a degree from Yale Drama. He didn't look like the Hollywood version of a rebel. On the surface, he wasn't right at all, but Winkler had something no one else brought to the table: subtlety. Instead of trying too hard to look cool, he made a bold, almost understated choice. During the audition, he reached up toward his head as if to comb his hair, paused midway, smirked, and dropped his hand. The message was clear. Fonzie's hair was already perfect. That tiny gesture carried enormous weight. It told the producers everything they needed to know. Fonzie wasn't the guy desperately trying to be cool. He was the guy who simply was cool. That one moment set Winkler apart from dozens of other actors. And when he added his own improvisations, the now legendary catchphrases like "I" and "Whoa," the room erupted. The producers realized they weren't just looking at another actor. They were looking at the embodiment of Fonzie. Against all odds, the role went to Henry Winkler, and with it, he stepped into television history. At first, Fonzie wasn't meant to be the star. He was written as a side character, a little edge in the squeaky clean world of Richie Cunningham and the wholesome Cunningham family. He hung out at Arnold's drive-in, leather jacket on, motorcycle close by, the rebel who gave the show a bit of bite. But audiences saw more. They saw a character who wasn't just a rebel without a cause. Fonzie had depth. He became Richie's protector, mentor, and older brother figure. A guy who taught lessons about loyalty, friendship, and responsibility, all delivered with swagger and charm. He wasn't just a tough guy. He was tough with a heart. Soon, kids across America were copying his thumbs-up gesture. practicing his slang on playgrounds and begging their parents for Fonzie lunchboxes, dolls, t-shirts, and even pinball machines. The character had escaped the screen and entered American culture. It didn't take long for ABC executives to see what was happening. The ratings were no longer centered on Richie and the family dynamic. They were riding squarely on Fonzie's shoulders. To cement that, the writers moved Fonzie into the Cunningham household, ensuring he was always at the heart of the action. By the end of the first season, the truth was undeniable. Happy Days wasn't just Richie Cunningham's show anymore. It was Fonzie's world, and America was living in it. But here's where Henry Winkler showed his brilliance. In the 1970s, when a TV character became popular, networks squeezed every ounce of publicity out of them. They'd appear in commercials, variety specials, guest spots, and more. But Winkler refused. He drew a line in the sand. Fonzie would exist only within Happy Days. No awkward guest appearances. No cheesy commercials. No making the character look silly, and he had one iron rule. Fonzie could never be shown as cowardly or foolish. He could be funny, sure, but never at the expense of his coolness. This rule preserved the mystique of the character and kept Fonzie larger than life. The only exception came when Sesame Street invited Winkler to appear as Fonzie to help kids learn the letter A. Winkler couldn't say no to that. It was filmed from the Happy Days studio, and it became the only time Fonzie ever appeared outside his original world. For Winkler, it was worth it, because some rules were meant to bend if it meant helping children. Of course, no story of Happy Days is complete without the infamous moment that gave birth to the phrase, jumping the shark. In 1977, one of television's most unforgettable moments took place, when Fonzie strapped on water, skis, and literally jumped over a shark during a trip to California in Happy Days. That single outrageous scene gave birth to the phrase, jumping the shark, now used in pop culture to describe the moment when a show turns to gimmicks to hold on to its audience. But here's the surprising truth. Happy Days didn't actually decline after that stunt. Ratings remained strong, and the series went on to air for another 164 episodes. Far from being a desperate trick by the writers, the idea actually came from Henry Winkler himself. An avid water skier, encouraged since childhood by his father, Winkler wanted to incorporate his real-life passion into the show. Not only did he pitch the idea, but he also performed much of the stunt work on his own. For Winkler, the moment wasn't a gimmick at all. It was a chance to showcase his athleticism, dedication, and willingness to go all in for the character who became a cultural icon. Behind the scenes, Happy Days thrived on its ensemble cast. Ron Howard anchored the show with his steady presence as Richie. Marion Ross and Tom Bosley gave it heart as the loving parents. And the friendships between Richie, Potsy, and Ralph Malph gave the show its humor. Off-screen, the cast bonded like a family. Gary Marshall, as showrunner, encouraged collaboration and improvisation. Actors were free to shape their roles. Winkler added many of Fonzie's signature gestures and lines this way, giving the character authenticity that audiences loved. Of course, like any long-running production, there were occasional tensions. Long hours, creative disagreements, and the pressures of success sometimes weighed on the cast. But the camaraderie held strong, and together they created a series that lasted 11 seasons, a remarkable achievement for any show. So why does Fonzie still matter today? Because Henry Winkler didn't just play him, he protected him. He knew that if Fonzie was overexposed or turned into a punchline, the magic would fade. Instead, he kept the character contained, disciplined, and iconic. That's why decades later, when people think of Happy Days, they think of the leather jacket. They think of the jukebox Fonzie could start with a punch. They think of the thumbs up, the catchphrases, the swagger. They don't think of a character who became silly or forgettable. They think of cool, pure, timeless cool. Fonzie wasn't just a sitcom character. He was a phenomenon, an era, and Henry Winkler's commitment ensured that his legacy would last. So here's the real question. Was Henry Winkler right to protect Fonzie's cool factor so carefully? Or should the Fonz have been everywhere, from commercials to spin-offs to movies, dominating pop culture in every corner? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the legacy of Happy Days, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with friends, and subscribe for more timeless stories. Because Fonzie's cool, that's forever. Thanks for watching.